They don't need a lot of literature teachers, they need a lot of language teachers. How people think of teachers as skilled technicians and not intellectual. And what they mean is teaching professions are shaping lives.
Whether my child will be English person through learning English. So how do you comment on this?
So there's a theoretical argument and a political argument against that. I would say I publish in English because I want to change the discipline as well. Mm-hmm. I don't want to only change my people.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Suresh, for your time to talk about decolonizing language education and research in South Asia. I begin our conversation by reading a few lines from a poem by a Pakistani linguist, Amr Mahbub, in his recent work on writing some subaltern practice. He says, "I am a subaltern, that's why they don't like me. I am a subaltern, that's why they devoice me. I am a subaltern, that's why I don't know. Stupid, crazy, wrong, weak, incorrect, they think of me. I am a subaltern, a child of colonization. I am a subaltern, living a life colonized. I am a subaltern, fighting to be decolonized." So in relation to this poem that talks about colonization and subaltern being devoiced, how would you explain your own life trajectory as an applied linguist as own belonging to a similar geopolitical setting, Sri Lanka, with a colonial history, and writing and working at a university in the global north with decolonial movements?
Yeah, that's a big question because, for everybody, there are a lot of different experiences that would suggest how they are devoiced. But maybe I should start closer to my profession, which is the profession we share as English language teachers in the university. So I did a first degree in literature, English literature. And then, but in Sri Lanka, they don't need a lot of literature teachers, they need a lot of language teachers. So I became a language teacher after my first degree, bachelor's degree in literature. And what I found was there was a kind of a mismatch between how we locally use language, for example, English, and the way the textbooks and curriculum, the orthodoxy, if I might use it that way, that is the legitimized ways of teaching English, wanted me to use the language. So just to illustrate, in Sri Lanka, we use Sri Lankan English a lot, but all our textbooks are in American English, or the tests the students eventually do, like TOEFL or IELTS, would be in native speaker varieties. And then also in our culture outside, and also in our universities, and even in the English literature classrooms and language classrooms, we code switch a lot. We go in and out of English, but at that time, when I started in 1985, code switching or use of any L1 in the classroom was considered an interference. That's the term they use, right? Interference hypothesis. So it appeared in those cases where the practices, the communicative practices that we were comfortable with, proscribed, we shouldn't be doing that. So that's one. So you might call that a way of being silenced. Because the way you naturally speak, the way you interact with your own folks were perceived as inappropriate. And further, like Amr Mahbub's poem, he talks about being treated as stupid, etc. That's what happens when you use your ways of using English. So that's one area where I thought, I might say there was a hypocrisy when we practice language one way and teach it another way. So for me personally, how do I go beyond this hypocrisy of doing one thing locally and then saying in terms of theory, we do something else, right? In order to resolve it, then I had to undertake a kind of a journey to try to find out more about, this is a complicated process because I have to find out more about our own language practices, educational traditions, etc., because they were not written anywhere. They were censored. The colonial administrators for about 500 years before we got independence, I think the Portuguese came to Sri Lanka in 1505, and all the way up to 1940s, we were with Britain.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a chance of studying those things, our language practices, educational practices. Undertaking a study of your own cultural educational practices, linguistic practices, is still going on for me. Because, as you know, our parts of the world are centuries old.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can read one book and say, I know everything. And then secondly, I had to, this is a kind of an ironic thing, but it's true, I had to also study what was the rationale behind the dominant ideologies in the West. Yeah. Why do they promote these methods? Why do they promote English only in the classroom? Why do they have this applied linguistics concept called interference hypothesis, right? So I had to understand it in that context because, for me, the best way to resist colonization, the best way to resist orthodoxy is to understand it first. Yeah. Because if not, you don't know how to mount effective resistance. You don't know what you're fighting against. So I had to know what I'm fighting against. So it's a kind of a complicated shuttling process, if I might say, trying to learn more about the orthodoxy, why these things are valued, but also going back to understand our own practices. So it's this hypocrisy locally that made me resolve it. Say, we don't have to pretend like we do these things that are prescribed in the textbooks. We do things differently, and why not do that? But from another point of view, you might say, as you started the question, it's about being silenced. You can't do the things you like, and therefore, in order to not to be silenced, you had to make a space for your own heritage and local traditions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Suresh. Now the next question is very basic, but it's a very important question because I believe that in many people in South Asia, they consider the field of applied linguistics as having little academic value, and it is not only with the linguistics, but also with other fields of social sciences and humanities, because people think in terms of the market value and use. So if I ask you, why did you choose to be an applied linguist, and what academic value do you think do you see in applied linguistics as a field in relation to transformation of societies and academia?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of the bias is that anything that is practitioner-based, teaching, for example, is considered in academia as not intellectual. Mm-hmm. So things that are intellectual are things like philosophy, literature, or the sciences. So they would tend to think of even education as practical. It's about what you do in the classroom. And also there have been similar colonizing theories about teaching. So there's some critical educationists in the United States, like Henry Giroux, they talk about it. How people think of teachers as skilled technicians and not intellectual. And what they mean is you are just skilled to put into practice what other people tell you, like the curriculum somebody gave you or the teaching philosophy somebody gave you. And you don't have to do anything in your mind. You don't have anything creative, intellectual, etc. So that's wrong because, first of all, teachers have to make a lot of decisions on their own, even if they get the syllabus from somebody else. Every classroom is different, and they have to understand their students well. But more importantly, I would say these teaching kind of professions are shaping lives. They are producing people. The students' futures are being shaped by us. More effective subject to teach than language. Because language is so intimate. It's about, it's related to how we think, how we present our identities, how we explore the world with different forms of knowledge. So language teaching is a very important profession for social change. I would say, personally, how I became a language teacher is both my parents were language teachers, but they did language teaching from after high school. They didn't go to the university. They just went straight from school to secondary school teaching of languages, of English actually. But in my case, of course, I could go further for a PhD. But I'll leave you with this nice term that is becoming popular, pracademic. And what pracademic means is something like two things, practitioner, academic. And what it means then is we are practitioners who bring a lot of theory, scholarship into our practice. A lot of people would say there is no practice without a theory, right? So you have this famous phrase, there's nothing practical like a theory, because any practice is informed by certain theories. So as language teachers, our practice is informed by a lot of ideologies, theories. But pracademic also means you use your academic knowledge for practical changes outside the classroom. So pracademic can mean practitioner inside the classroom as a teacher. Right. But pracademics are also community workers, social activists, public intellectuals, because all of them are practicing what they are theorizing outside in the community. So in my case, like I'm right now not completely a language teacher, because I'm not in ESL classes in undergraduate courses or even high school courses. That's been a long time since I did that. I produce teacher educators all times. You know, the graduate students we teach go on to be teachers and teacher educators. But I'm still a pracademic because I'm a practitioner in the sense of preparing my students in relation to the practices that are out there, the practices in education, practices of classroom, but more importantly, how do we change the world? So I would say it's not special for applied linguists. All of us have to do that, but applied linguists have our own way of transforming the world, just like I think an engineer has another way of transforming the world. So for me, it's not a challenge only for applied linguistics. But the challenge for me is to identify, as an applied linguist, what kind of change can I do? What's my role in this huge puzzle of inequalities and changes?
Yeah, thank you so much. In South Asian context, and especially in Pakistan, if I talk about, then we see that colonial linguistics and ideologies and knowledge structures are dominant in academia. And especially they are like officially sanctioned through curricula and language education policies and yearly practices. If I talk about Pakistani applied linguistics subject, then these are more centered around like mainstream ELT pedagogy and Eurocentric language theorizations, and even topics like error analysis and all that. So how do you comment on this, and how can we rethink applied linguistics in South Asia?
Right. Yeah, it's really ironic. Whenever I go to countries outside the US or Europe, I tell people, I see the same thing you mentioned in those countries where people are still obsessed over American knowledge, European knowledge, the theories that come from here, publications that come from here. So, but what I tell them is, the people who are doing more research about you are people in the United States and Europe. Because you are the person who can do that well. You're not doing it. They are doing it, and they are publishing more and more about you. So it's really ironic in the sense that, so there are a couple of things in that example which I see all over the world and applies to Pakistan. One is that the academic mainstream seems to have moved from the things we want. Error analysis and interference hypothesis, English only, grammar, etc., native speakerism. They are not the big things here in the West. They are talking about diversity, multilingualism, translingualism, decolonization. Isn't that ironic? A lot of people here talking about decolonization. Secondly, the irony is, we who know those experiences, we are not talking about it. We are not interested in that. We are going after the Western knowledge, which is like 50 years old. And those guys are the people who are talking about experiences they don't know, because this is not indigenous to their practices. So it's a very sad situation. I guess one thing It's still, I think, eventually an ideological problem. It's not about intelligence, it's not about knowledge, it's about what we want, what we value. And I guess in a lot of global South countries, we are still part of a thinking that development in terms of the West is where all countries have to move. Technological development, modernist development, countries and communities as homogeneous, everybody speaks the same language and works towards progress. So that ideology is still informing a lot of the curriculum and pedagogy. So here's another irony. Right now, when there is so much conversations about diversity and decolonization taking place, in some countries, they are talking about EMI, English medium instruction, but comes again in a kind of a funny way in the name of progress. What they say is, in order for our students to and our communities to get new knowledge, to develop, for our countries to develop, we have to become part of the global epistemological progress. We have to know their knowledge, we have to work in their countries, we have to get there, study in their universities. So English is the way out. So unfortunately, it's becoming more and more homogeneous, everybody trying to teach English. We'll come to the question about English later, but for me, the issue is you don't have to abandon your language, your culture for progress. There are a lot of people can make an argument that there are things that are part of our cultures and community traditions that are more important for progress because we value the whole ecological makeup of our environments. We are not for destroying nature, not for destroying cultures. We don't have to sacrifice these things. And it's a different kind of progress, better kind of progress, and something that's more affirming of our own traditions. So, but that's an ideology that we need to cultivate among our friends and community members, that the things we know are not inferior. The things we do are not inferior. So till that happens, I think people are going to still believe anything comes from UK or USA is superior to what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And especially in our society, we see that English fever is a reality. People don't consider English as a language only, but they view it in terms of symbolic power, class status, and prestige. And it's not only English, but we see that now people see their children being proficient in English, and they also want to see that how even the entire humanity is being reshaped in relation to language. For example, in one of my articles, in my data, the teacher shared that, for example, the parents actually asked the teacher whether my child will be English person through learning English. So how to overcome this English fever, and especially when it is trying to dehumanize people in South Asia.
Right. That's very true all over the world. I think, by the way, English fever is a term that is used in a lot of countries. I've heard from Korea, Sri Lanka, a lot of countries have the same term, English fever. Probably in China, a lot of students tell me that they have a similar phrase in their country. Yeah, it goes back to the earlier point I made about how we value, our ideologies value anything that comes from the West as superior. But I think English fever is now motivated by something very subtle, which is part of neoliberalism. So not the earlier form of colonization where English was imposed on local people as a superior language and loaded with superior culture and knowledge, which is what you would have heard of Thomas Macaulay. His minutes actually presented English like that. That is a superior language to Arabic, to Sanskrit, etc. But right now, I think something more subtle is taking place. What people are saying is, one argument is that, especially after decolonization, independence, where our countries brought back our first languages after independence, the West is now making the argument in the favor of multilingualism, you have to learn English. So it's a very subtle kind of argument. Why are you being isolationist? Why are you being backward? Don't you like multilingualism? The whole world is talking about multilingualism. Learn some English. right? So the funny thing about that is English is not innocent language. Once you learn English, you can see what's happening to your parents and students. They get attracted more to English. And I think Robert Phillipson pointed to this irony that in the name of multilingualism, English is becoming more powerful. So it's a kind of a subtle kind of argument, and probably, I don't know, even parents and children in our countries believe like that. I want to be multilingual and therefore I want to learn English. And then the next thing you know, they forgot their first language or they stopped using it, right? A second kind of subtle argument that's coming is people are saying for globalization, we need to be flexible. We need to travel to many places. We need to work in many places. Or like in your case, for higher education, you go to Finland and you talk in English. So they say English is so necessary, useful for globalization. And if we are participating in globalization, then it's good to use a common language. The common language makes it easier for us to travel, to have education, work, interact with other communities. So that's a bigger argument. So it'll take, maybe I will see another question or opportunity to develop the argument that we can also all be diverse and still be efficient and still work together. Working in one language is not the only way for coexistence to happen or cosmopolitanism to happen. So if you think about our part of the world, South Asia, before colonization, we had a lot of languages, and still a lot of languages. And that doesn't have to, of course, right now, post-colonial India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, there's a lot of conflict, ethnic conflict. But in the past, it didn't have to create conflict. People just went in and out of their languages. They became more plurilingual, they learned more languages, they negotiated the diversity by just being tolerant and patient and doing accommodation, trying to accommodate each other's diversity. So it's possible, but if people don't believe it, it's harder to make this case that you can have a collaborative, coexistent world in multilingualism with multiple languages. It doesn't have to be in one language. But that's another subtle argument where people believe in order to have one world, which is efficient and all of us work together, one language is necessary.
Yeah, and especially again, we see, for example, to counter the hegemony of English in South Asian society, there's an ethno-linguistic response that emphasizes the use of local languages only. And even I've come across, I've interacted with many people who even they are less tolerant about even code mixing and diversity. They believe that there are real linguistic boundaries and we have to preserve those. And maybe they want to view language in relation to identity politics. So how do you comment on this?
Yeah. So there's a theoretical argument and a political argument against that. The theoretical argument is there's nothing pure. All our languages are mixed. It's a lot of people in ideologies would talk about it as ideological misrecognition. We don't see the diversity because our ideologies make it appear like our language is pure and our language is homogeneous. But there's nothing like that. So I can say, you might have other examples from Pakistan, but in Sri Lanka, when I talk to Tamil people, my first language, they have now moved to Toronto, Canada, USA area, in California, London. And when I interview them about why they are losing their first language or how their children are using Tamil, they would say things like that. They would say, our children are code switching, and that's not Tamil. They have to learn Tamil both in spoken and written form. They have to do everything in Tamil, and they shouldn't code mix. So I said, don't you realize that Tamil already has a lot of Sanskrit in it? And don't you realize that Tamil already has Portuguese words and English words in it? But you consider pure Tamil, that you don't want these children to mix, is already impure. So where do you draw a line and say, no, okay, we stop here and we don't allow our languages to grow anymore, right? So first of all, so that's a theoretical problem about how we think about language purity. There's no pure language. But the political problem question is this. I feel that there are two different ways to resist. One way to resist is to say, I won't have anything to do with that. That's fine. But the other way to resist is, I want to take it over and make it my own, or I want to take it over and diversify it. So, for example, one thing that's happening in English is people in our part of the world, because we spoke English for so many centuries now, we have created our own varieties of English, like Pakistani English, Indian English, Sri Lankan English, etc. So that's impure for the native speakers. They don't like that. They think we are changing the language. So they can see the resistance. We don't see it, but they can see the problem. They see they don't like it. But a third, more pragmatic argument is this. So basically, the second argument is there might be a better way to resist by dealing with English rather than separating ourselves from English, rather than saying, I don't want anything to do with English. We might use it for our purposes, even to talk about ancient glories, right? Our cultures, languages. We might promote that better to the rest of the world through English, through doing scholarship, through doing research, through publishing. But a third issue is that, for me, it's not about either or, it's both and. So what I mean by that is, if you are saying both parties, like your previous question about English fever, they are saying only English. And then there's the other party saying only the vernacular. And both are kind of impoverishing themselves unnecessarily. For me, what's valuable is for you to know your first languages, local languages, and English is even more powerful. And what's wrong with that? In the sense, isn't it better for our communities and also for us personally to be proficient in multiple languages? Or should we reduce ourselves and say, this is the only thing I want to have? So I would say that the debate shouldn't be about, is it about English or the vernacular? It should be about, how do we bring the vernacular into English? Or how do we bring the vernacular and the diverse languages we have in our environment into the mainstream, where other people also learn it? That's the other problem. Don't we want other people to learn Sindhi and Urdu? If it's a good language, you're proud of it, we should promote it rather than isolate it. So that's a more pragmatic kind of position for me, that I don't want, I'm not thinking in terms of an either or situation. I want to expand our repertoires more. And I want to say this one final thing. In our parts of the world, we never reduced ourselves to one language. We were always multilingual, India, South Asia. And English is part of that ecology now. We can't help it. Once it came, we use it now. So the funny thing is, some of our people, even in our first language, use a lot more English than we realize. So we have jokes between Sri Lankans and Indians who speak Tamil. So we Sri Lankans go to India, and I won't tell the joke in Tamil because your listeners may not appreciate it. But we go into a shop and try to buy something, and the shopkeeper doesn't understand, right? And then he says, "Oh, you mean that?" And he gives an English word, and he says, "Say it in proper Tamil." This word, it's actually an English word. We are speaking kind of something closer to the Tamil. These guys have even forgotten that it's not a Tamil word, but this guy is thinking we are not speaking Tamil because we are so pure. So what I want to say is, ours is a multilingual world, and English is no big deal for us. It's part of our ecology.
Thank you very much. And in your writings, I have seen when you're talking about the decolonizing universities, you seem to talk about the concept of translingual university or translingual education. Or even some scholars talk about trans-epistemic ELT or education. So how would you explain this translingual university, and how can it be materialized in a South Asian context?
Right. So it's good that you connect translingual to trans-epistemic, because people now, a lot of us are defining translingual as not only about language, it's also about a lot of other things. So the way I would think about translingual for people who haven't heard the term is, we are looking at communication as beyond first of all, one language at a time. So just as we talked earlier about not either or, all languages are mixed with other languages. In practice, at least. Now, in textbooks, they don't look like that. But in practice, we code switch and move in and out of languages. So that's one side. But another way to look at trans is beyond language itself, to look at other modalities of communication, like gestures, instruments, objects. They all communicate meaning-making. But another form of trans is, this comes from, a lot of people would say, trans theories. Trans theories are basically theories that value in-betweenness. There is not, once again, either or. Like there is this paradigm, that paradigm. Trans says you can look inside the paradigms and mix them and go further, right? So, so translingual is also about making knowledge impure, making society impure. Other people might use words like hybrid, in-betweenness. Trans is about in-betweenness. And so translingual is also doing something beyond communication, because it's challenging very orthodox ways of thinking about knowledge, orthodox ways of thinking about culture and identities. So, for example, translingual people, like all of us, have very complex identities. As I tell people, I write better in English rather than in Tamil, but I speak better in Tamil rather than English. It's complicated. It's not either or. That's my translingual identity, and that just baffles a lot of people. They want me to be either completely Tamil or completely English. They can't understand this mix. So trans is about complications, how you go beyond orthodoxies, binaries. That's another way to put it. It's going beyond binaries. So a translingual university would value that kind of going beyond binaries, starting all the way from language, but also into education and knowledge. So in language, basically, how I promoted that term was people were talking about English only as an educational need or an orthodoxy. They were also thinking about Europe, like England and other countries, where in order to make international students follow their curriculum, they use English as a common language. And so they are torn between, in some cases, using Finnish, or in some disciplines, they might ask them to learn it. In other cases, they use English. So one way to go beyond this is, what we mean by translingual is, even those two languages are not enough, because the students are from so many different cultures and countries. Don't you want your local students to learn from some of the students who are coming from outside? Why limit it to just two languages? So, and then the world as we know it is not limited to one language or the other. Because of migration and a lot of other things, there's a lot going on where people are mixing, people are mobile, people are interacting a lot more. So the world needs multiple languages. And so the big question is, we can't teach multiple languages. So what I finally propose for something translingual is not teach separate grammars of 5 languages, 10 languages, etc., but make people lifelong learners. That is, how do you prepare a student to be always learning languages, always ready to deal with people who come with a different language, always shuttle between different language groups. So simply put, that just involves a readiness. I call it dispositions, or you might call it with body habitus. How do we create a capacity in people to be a lifelong learner, to expand their repertoires all the time, rather than be just happy with one language they know. So a translingual education or a translingual university would cultivate a readiness to keep on learning multiple languages, open your mind beyond binaries. So those are some of the things I would do.
Yeah, thank you so much. And especially in terms of listening to research, most of our research in applied linguistics from the global south is published in English, and it is published in reputable journals which are not accessible to many people in South Asia. And as a result, we face a criticism. People actually criticize that in our context that we are trying to talk about decolonization and writing it in English as a colonial language, and again publishing our articles in journals which are actually in the center. So I wanted to ask that whether the decolonization is possible through English.
Right. So to begin with, once again, this shouldn't be an either or. Mm-hmm. So I write in Tamil, I published in Tamil for my local audience. A lot of people don't know the journals because they're not available outside. They are only available in Sri Lanka. So we should publish in more languages, including our languages. I tell a lot of some of my students, we have to be multi-genre writers, meaning we shouldn't be writers only in one genre, academic article for publication, and also one language. We should use multiple styles, So I publish different kinds of articles in different places. So just to give you an example, a long time ago, I met a teacher somewhere in a conference where she said, "Oh, Professor Canagarajah, this particular article that you wrote changed my whole way of looking at teaching and how I do scholarship." So I said, "What was that article?" It was like a one-page article I wrote in a TESOL newsletter. Mm-hmm. That article changed your life? I'm writing like 20 pages research article for 3 years, and it's in somebody's library and nobody's reading it. And this one page changed your life. So sometimes it's like that. The genres that are making real changes are not the academic article. I call academic articles high-stakes genres with low-stakes readership. Or low-stakes outcome, meaning it doesn't produce much, just gives you a tenure and a promotion. It's on the CV, so it's high stakes, but low productivity because it's not affecting anybody's life. So we have to do other kinds of writing. But on the other hand, we have to do academic writing also, because what I tell people is, so what are you saying? What I'm saying, you want to leave academia to the powerful people. You want the academic journals and the university to the powerful people, and you say, I'll change my country, but I'll leave the university in the West as it is. It's dangerous. Because those are the journals and textbooks we are using, in our own classes, right? All these, and they have the infrastructure for that, economy for that, to produce all these things and send. We don't have the money to do those things, so it's coming here. So why not change them, right? You have to kind of hit the hydra on the head. Like a hydra, of course, is a very dangerous metaphor, because the what hydra needs is, you can't kill it. It just keeps producing in your head. But still, we have to do the struggle, we have to hit it. So I would say I publish in English because I want to change the discipline as well. I don't want to only change my people. Partly because I think in a lot of cases, I'm preaching to the converted in my community. They understand that's really true. Even when we didn't publish in Sri Lanka, when I started as a teacher, we were doing very critical, progressive scholarship. We were talking about it, but we were not writing it. So if you think about that example, I've mentioned that in other places about my life as a scholar in University of Jyväskylä, Sri Lanka. It's very dynamic. We are very critical thinkers. We get together and talk about very radical political stuff. We critique the textbooks. We critique the knowledge that's coming from outside. But the next day we go to the classroom, we are using an American textbook because we don't have it. We haven't written it. We're just talking. There are a lot of other problems, like our universities don't value publishing, they don't give enough resources for publishing, there's no infrastructure for publishing in our languages. So it's a big limitation. All the nice thinking you are doing is not written down, and therefore your students and future community, members don't have an opportunity to know that. So that's one problem. We have to write more in our own language. But the second problem is, we have to change the field because this is where everything is coming from. Universities, publications, they are considered the space where orthodoxy emerges, or anything expert comes from here. So we need to challenge that as well.
So in your writings, I have noticed that you use different strategies like discursive hybridity, code mashing, and embodiment to counter the monolingual and genre convention and discursive nouns in academic writing and publishing. So I was wondering that since you are an established scholar and you can negotiate your position with editors and reviewers, So is it possible for people like me, young researchers in South Asia, and there are many other people in South Asian multilingual settings, to bring to use these similar strategies or others into their academic writing and publishing in order to get accepted and published?
Yeah. No, so I to begin with, you're right. Up to a point, as a senior scholar, I have a lot of freedom. And one practical thing that you wouldn't have thought about that is that I just don't care about getting rejected. It makes a difference. Like for a young scholar, you can't, because this is important for your career. Mm-hmm. You can't sacrifice a publication. Therefore, you won't take risks. Mm-hmm. So that's one way in which it helps me. But the way people think it helps me is not true. And that is, since you are a senior scholar, mm-hmm. other people let you do what you want. Mm-hmm. That's not true, and that's why I'm going to give you a lesson on what young people also can do. Mm-hmm. So when I publish something or send something to a journal for anonymous review, they don't know me. Yeah. So I have to do the same work that a young scholar does in order to persuade them that this diversity in my writing is necessary for the article. So simply put, whatever you do, whatever strategy you adopt, you should be able to indicate it to the reader, whether it's a reviewer or editor or others. This makes the article better, or even better, this is part of this article. Without this, the article will suffer. So that's where the word strategy comes. So what I tell people is using multiple languages is not a question about linguistics. It's about rhetoric. And what I mean by rhetoric is, how well do you do it? Rhetoric is persuasion. Mm-hmm. Can you persuade your reviewer, your reader, that this is necessary? Yeah. So things that I do are like, I might indicate this is an article about diversity, and in order to preach, to practice what I preach, this article will use diversity. Yeah. Of course, we don't come out and say that. Only a dumb reader needs it. Unfortunately, some people read like that, they can't catch the point. But you give some very subtle clue that for this article, this is, I have to do this. There are other places where you might say, there are these important concepts that I draw from my local culture, my indigenous thinking, which can't be translated into other words. So I'm going to use it in my language. Then they will understand. Yeah. So basically you can prepare the reader also through some signals that this article is going to be different because it's about voice, and therefore I can't, I have to use a voice that's more comfortable for me. So, but all of them are strategies. And you see, here's the problem. A lot of people are not studying that. They're still polarized on the big debate. Can I use local languages in an English article or not? The big question, as I told you earlier, should be beyond the either or to how do I use the local language in an English publication? That's a big topic, huge topic. And there's a lot to be learned. People are doing it. So the interesting thing, and this you will appreciate, post-colonial writers, probably 100 years more, I was going to say centuries ago, there might be examples more than, maybe in early 1900s, there are examples in India, like Raja Rao wrote Kantapura, I think in 1924. And he used a lot of Indian English, a way of writing that was very local. And his preface in the novel, 1924, says, in order to write in English, I have to write differently. Here's a nice quotation. I used to know this well. It's like, I can use English, but it'll be an English that is in spirit Indian, because I have to bring, right? So think about it. In 1924, this guy is making a revolution. He's not asking permission from anybody. He's not debating, should I not? He's making a case. So that's in the preface. He made the case. And then the novel just goes on. He's using a lot of Indian English and local words and etc. So we haven't even started studying that. We should study that. Like, how do you prepare your reader? How do you persuade your reader? So for me, it's not a question of either or. It's not a question of should I, can I. Think about this. There are people from privileged languages like Spanish, French, etc., German. They're using their words, language terms in English. Yeah. it's a hypocrisy. They are allowed, but we are told you can't do that. How did you manage those words, French words, in an English critical article or literary journal? You don't complain. And it's like, looks very natural. But when it comes to other languages, people complain. So we need to create more knowledge about how this can be done. All of us, whether young scholars or old. So I think the challenge is the same for young scholars or old scholars. Old scholars can fail if they don't do the strategies well. And young scholars can succeed when they are very creative and bold and they are writing very persuasively.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And most research being carried out in South Asian universities is influenced by this British and American knowledge. And even if we look at the research paradigm, for example, I believe in Pakistan, for example, most of research is influenced by this quantitative paradigm and experimental designs and ELT. And even this kind of a qualitative research being carried out, it is actually assessed based on the quantitative criteria in terms of like objectivity and reliability and all of these issues. So considering, even if we talk about this textual structure of the dissertations and articles, they are even considered as a fixed, like you have this structure and you have to follow it. So how can we actually decolonize this entire process?
Yeah. The good news is it started a little bit where people are thinking of change. So, for example, some of those expectations about the quantitative paradigm and experimental articles, experimental research, and also we call this in English the IMRD writing structure, which is very scientific. Introduction, methods, results and discussion. In a lot of humanities, social sciences, we don't have results that is separate from discussion. Both of them are together. So lately, when people even in the West, in the United States, UK, Europe, they realized the limitations of empirical science, they started thinking about other research methods, other ways of other genres of writing. So as a continuation, we have things like autoethnographies, right, or narrative research. Where people feel like you don't have to separate your object of analysis from you, the researcher, or from the environment. All of these things they go together. There is a different kind of knowledge when you look at what you want to study in the total environment. And also in relation to your values and your identity being introduced into that mix. So it's changing, and also writing is changing. As you know, people don't publish only the IMRD essay articles anymore. They publish autoethnographies, narratives, first-person reflections. They're all becoming acceptable. Yeah. But the big question now is that is also coming from the West. We are not doing it. So are there genres that are more comfortable for us coming from the East? Are there ways of doing academic writing or academic communication that we value from our parts of the world? So things like people have talked about just stories, even without analysis, or poetry, a lot of in Tamil culture. Till colonization, all the medicine, law, philosophy, religion, everything we did was in verse. We didn't have a prose structure. The prose came after England came, Europe came and taught us prose structure. Before that, everything was in verse. Yeah. So that's something to think about. But what I would say is, once again, you can't just write differently without knowing the academic norms. In order to engage with it. Like you can't say, I'm going to do anything I like, because there are certain conventions. We won't do it in our own country. We won't go to a funeral and crack jokes. But say, hey, I come from another culture. I can do anything I want. There are some conventions there. This is the way to talk. Or you won't go to an elementary school classroom and give a lecture like you do in a university. You say, okay, this is a class of elementary school kids. You have to interest them, use more multimodal resources, etc. So academic environment is another environment, so we have to respect, you can't talk like you're talking in the street. We have to first engage with the norms, but the interesting thing is the norms will change. It's already changing. Yeah. But it is a kind of a two-way kind of interaction. we want it to change, but we also want to know what's there. Because if you don't know what's there, you'll be sent out, you'll be rejected. So you won't be able to do the creative forms of writing in a way that disregards, but it's the current convention. The current convention is already different from what it was 50 years ago. So just to give you a funny example, they say the academic article started in 16th century in England, the Transactions of the Royal Scientific Society. It started as, their publication started as a second person letter. Dear editor, yesterday I did a research about this. And I first formed an instrument in order to do this. And then I found these results. And I want to offer this to you, our fellow scientists. It was a second person letter. Can you imagine that? Just didn't have even not instruction. But later, what there's funny stories, they say the editor found that if they reject something, it becomes personal. So they said, we'll establish a review committee. Then it became third person because you're not talking to the editor anymore. And there were a lot of other changes. In those early publications, there was no literature review because there was no literature. Once the literature review comes, now it's complicated. You have to review the whole literature, situate it. The whole opening move in the AMRD structure, the introduction, is one of the most difficult one because over time it became complicated. So what I'm saying is the academic article has changed all the time. And so this is the answer for people who seem to ask questions like, can you use your first language? Can you write differently? First answer is, it has always changed. Why are you limiting yourself by saying, the funny thing is some very progressive scholars come up with that argument. You can't do that. You have to change the policy. You have to change the institution. That's true. We have to change the policies. But this can also be changed. We have to engage with this also.
And then there's a last question. Considering that many South Asian societies, including Pakistan, are influenced by colonial knowledge structure, Eurocentric model discourses, and many people, including applied linguists, are not well aware of several ongoing debates on decolonizing, translanguaging in South Asia. Even though they are aware, then there are the institutional policies or curriculum which are like they are officially sanctioned. So in that case, they are supposed to follow those courses to teach applied linguistics in that. So what do you think in such cases, what are the responsibilities of applied linguistics in South Asia?
Right. So there are two things. One is, of course, to resist the policies that are given to you from your own administrators and policymakers. But the other is, how do you get to know and learn from fellow applied linguists? As I said in the earlier comment, the very first question, I had to learn what is our culture, what is our knowledge, what is our epistemological tradition. We don't know it. So the problem for this is it's difficult, it's time consuming, and some people don't want difficulty. Rather than doing that, just do what the administration wants you to do, right? Because this takes you more time, more effort by yourself, unrewarded also. So I would say, as a teacher, it's easy. You'll understand why. As a teacher, within the walls of my own classroom, I have some autonomy. This is well known. People have found whenever, even in policy research, when policies come to you, we find that how to practice the policy, adopt the policy is left to the teacher and the students. So, and the policymaker is not there every day. Of course, he'll come one day, we can deal with that, but not every day. So there is some space to do things differently. And also here again, this has to be a kind of a negotiation. What I mean by that is you can't abandon, disregard what they give you. You take it. So here's one clever argument that was given in another policy context. This was the No Child Left Behind. In America, we had this policy by the government saying, in order for every student to succeed, we'll make sure that they all pass in a particular test, national test. That way, different schools don't have different curriculum, don't different things. The problem was this. The education in the United States became test-oriented. And a lot of teachers said, this is not critical teaching. We don't want to do that. So in their own classrooms, they did more critical work. They introduced other subjects, etc. But when the policymakers ask, what are you doing? They say, this is the best way to pass the test. This is the clever argument. It's true. It's not untrue. I actually face a same problem myself. I was teaching in New York before I came here, and this was like undergraduate teaching of writing. How it was evaluated in the end, all the students from all the classes were brought to one place to write one test. In 50 minutes, they had to write an essay. So the students came and asked me in my courses, why don't you prepare us for the test? Don't teach us all these other things about writing, about being creative, persuasive, voice, etc. So here's the clever answer I gave them. If you can do this, you will pass the test very easily because you're doing much more than what the test wants. I have told them other things also. In order for you to be a good writer, the test is not enough. You have to also do a lot of things after that test. You have to work outside, you have to learn subjects. So I was making a case to do other things beyond the syllabus in the name of the syllabus. And you can do that. Yeah. So I am always bringing extra stuff, like a lot of Indian scholars here in this university, even during my publications or teaching, introducing them to scholars who are writing outside in other countries. Of course, I have a little bit of freedom now, as a graduate level teacher. You can say you have to expand your mind. It's harder in like secondary schools and stuff like that. But even there, people are making a case. What they are saying is the classroom is not a homogeneous context. There's a lot going on here. And if you are clever, then you might make a case that learning more about our cultures, learning more about our regions, our traditions, is a better way to conquer the Western knowledge. And with conquer, I mean not only know it, but go beyond it, to change it. That's another way to think about knowledge for teachers, that what a lot of teachers would say, like Paulo Freire, is not the banking knowledge where you load information. It's about transforming knowledge. A good student, a good teacher would transform knowledge. And for that, you need to go beyond the syllabus.
Thank you very much, dear Suresh. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.